Hello and welcome back to Fierce Fridays. My name is Elise, and today I have my friend Brooke on here who will be sharing her journey as a medical mom. How are you today, Brooke?
I am good. I'm happy to talk to you today.
Good, good. I'm glad that you agreed to do this because you have been an important person in my journey with Samara, and I feel like I learned a lot from you through that journey and trying to figure out when we started connecting. And it was back in 2021, early in 2021, as we were talking, as we were getting information about Samara's eyes.
Mhm.
And so we'll talk a little bit more about that later on, because Phoenix has her own journey with her vision.
Mhm.
And so before we get into that, I'd really like you to share what your life was like before
Uh,
Phoenix.
I grieve my prior life before Phoenix because it was carefree and it was fun. And, when my husband and I were dating, we would bar hop and just get lost in the city. And we just had all of this carefree time. And I grieve that because now that's not the case. And we have our seasons, and I have come to peace with that for the most part because that's a prior season. But I've embraced the current season that I am, which is motherhood and wifehood. And before kids, it was just all fun, and I went to work and didn't have to worry about keeping somebody alive and nurses coming into my home. So I miss the privacy piece of it. Um, but it's not something that I would change right now because that would mean, Phoenix is not here. So it's a small price to pay in the grand scheme of things.
Right. And I can appreciate what you said about grieving the, I guess, normalcy in a word, right? Um, because that's something that sometimes we skip over. The part that life is different after you get a diagnosis. Life changes drastically when you have either yourself or your loved one has something serious happening to them. And we skip to the just doing part and we don't stop to reflect like it is a loss of something. It is a loss of the life that was. But you beautifully said how it's a transition and it's a different stage of life. So let's talk a little bit about that stage of life and the transition of getting the diagnosis and finding out what you were going to be dealing with.
Yeah. So my story is very similar to most trisomy mother stories. My daughter has trisomy 18. I had a blood test done at 10 weeks, and they make it very clear that the test that I did is not a diagnostic test, it's a screening test. So my results reflected I think it was a 20% or 30% chance that Phoenix had trisomy 18. So my doctor at the time wanted me to get an amniocentesis to confirm the diagnosis, which is a diagnostic test, and I declined to do that. So my only option was to wait until my 20-week anatomy scan. And that day, I don't remember the date, but the day sticks out to me because it was the day that Aretha Franklin was being laid to rest, and her funeral was on TV. That was the day of my 20-week anatomy scan. And that day is when our world completely changed because it was semi-confirmed that Phoenix had these anomalies and that it was consistent with trisomy 18.
So when you received that news, how how did you handle that? How did your family handle that?
I was with my mom on that day, and I was numb because the things that the genetic counselor said to me, and how abortion was pushed upon me and crammed down my throat, and how I was told that comfort care was the only option at the time. And I was very numb. I felt like I was in the twilight zone. You never envision yourself getting a diagnosis like this about your unborn child. Nobody goes through life and says, I think when I'm 38 or 30, however old I was, I'm going to get this diagnosis. Nobody thinks that. So it's very blinding when you get a diagnosis. And I think that's why I just felt numb.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah.
Yeah. And then it's not only just getting a diagnosis, which is a shock in itself, it's also getting a rare diagnosis that is like something you've never heard of. At least for me, I had never heard of trisomy 13 or holoprosencephaly, or any of these rare diagnoses that exist.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you get a situation where it's like, well, it's already stressful, but then you add on the fact that there's not a lot of information, it adds layers onto the fear and all the different emotions that I'm sure you must have experienced.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you adjust? How did you, like, what was the next phase like for you?
I immediately delved into community. So I did a search for, okay, there has to be somebody else on earth that is dealing with this. And that's when I found the soft community. And through the soft community, I was connected with another local mom who connected me with a doctor at our current hospital because it was very evident. It was evident that if I were to give birth at this particular hospital, that my daughter would not be allowed to would be given a shot. Eventually, when I got the diagnosis, I delved into community, and that's when I found the soft community. And from there, I was put in touch with the right people that ultimately allowed me to deliver at Texas Children's Hospital, and they've been very, very good for Phoenix, and that's the reason why she's still here at almost 5 years old.
Wow.
Community,
That's
community, community.
community, community, community. I'm so glad you brought that up because this is definitely a journey, at least in my opinion, and it sounds like that resonates with you. This is not a journey that you can go through alone.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say alone, I don't mean like, well, you have your family and your social support or whatever you had going on before. Having a group of people that are going through a similar path, because although like we're not all the same, our diagnoses are a little bit different, but it's similar. And hearing other stories and getting more information and education is like it's so important in this walk.
Can I piggyback off something that you just said
Of course.
regarding community?
Mm-hmm.
Um, that also was a part of my grief because this diagnosis is very isolating. I couldn't even turn to my mom. My mom
Mm-hmm.
didn't know anything about this. My mom had never had a special needs child with severe physical disabilities. Nobody in my family had experienced this. So this is why I turned outward and found soft to find people that are treading this same path as I am. So
Mm-hmm.
that's another part of grief when it comes to getting this diagnosis. It's very isolating. Only in the grand scheme of things, only a small amount of people walk this journey. So.
That is so, so true. It's a very different experience being on the caregiving side. And so I think our family members and our friends have great intentions, and hopefully we have great support still from them in different ways. But that part of understanding is different when you find community.
Definitely.
So with that being said, how did Phoenix's birth go? Like, what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, it was a planned C-section. My OB that delivered her is phenomenal. He is an angel here on earth. He was very compassionate, but very direct at the same time. And I'm paraphrasing, but this is the gist of what he told me. He said, the road will be bumpy, but we will help you get through it. He said, I cannot predict what's going to happen once Phoenix get here, but I can promise you I will get her here safely. And so she was born via C-section on January 9th, 2019. And the C-section itself went well. I was prepared to expect a lot of people in the OR, a lot of people on standby to intervene however deemed necessary. And that was the case. There was I would say about 10 to 12 people in the OR when she was born. So when she came out, I could kind of see through the partition, and my husband said, "Oh, she has hair." So that was the first thing he said. But when I saw my baby, it was like her right foot was flopped over her shoulder. And so my first thing that I said was, "What's wrong with my baby's leg?" She had dislocated her knee while in utero because she was in breech position.
Wow.
So considering it was a pretty routine procedure, she needed blow-by oxygen, but not a cannula when she was born. She was blue, and I think that she had to be stimulated before she actually cried. So it's unclear if she came out breathing. From the looks of her, I don't think she was. So that was her birth. Now, in between the OR and me seeing her for the first time, that's a blur. I can't remember what happened. I know I was in my room somewhere, but I did not see Phoenix until after midnight the next day. And we went into the NICU, and that's when we saw her hooked up to the monitors, and her leg had been casted because the nurse had to pop her leg back into place. And I didn't see that. So yeah, to see your newborn and not be sure if they're going to live or not is something that I don't wish on anybody. That uncertainty, I don't wish that on anybody.
Yeah, that is, I think, a hard, I mean, there's so many hard parts in the journey, just like there's so many beautiful parts of it, but that not knowing what's going to happen at the delivery is something that's very intense. The reality of having a baby, and like some of the moms in our group that had to leave the hospital without their baby, you know, which is something that, you know, I prayed. I was like, God, I just want to meet her alive, right? I need to meet her alive. And I want to go home with this baby. And unfortunately, some people don't get to. And so I'm grateful that Phoenix is here. And as you said, she is almost 5. What have these last 5 years been like for you? What are some of the challenges and blessings you have faced?
I want to start with the positive, some of the blessings. Phoenix brings a light to our home. She has gone through the most out of all of us in this home, but she smiles the most. And she is such an inspiration. And, you know, I get down on myself sometimes, but I look at my daughter and I look at her smiling, and she's been through open heart surgery, trach surgery, G-tube surgery, numerous procedures, pokes and prods. It brings me back to reality that this is minuscule, because look at this baby right here. Look at this miracle baby. So she brings this constant reminder that God is good, God is real, and that there's always somebody that has gone through way worse and has a better attitude about it. And Phoenix is one of those people. She's nonverbal, but she has a great attitude. Yeah.
Yes. And her smile lights up a room. Like every time you post a picture of her, and I remember like some of her like first day of school pictures, I'm like, oh my goodness, she's so cute. And then she just looks like such a happy child. Our children have the capacity to feel loved and to spread love.
Yeah.
Exactly. Even though they don't do it in the traditional way.
Definitely. They convey their feelings and their moods non-verbally, and it comes through loud and clear, just as if they were to say it verbally. So,
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
She just brings a ray of sunlight to our lives. And, you know, she's a fighter. She's a true fighter. um, so yeah, those are some of the blessings. Now, some of the challenges for me, the biggest challenge is the nurses. Having somebody in your home all the time, in your space, hovering over your child. But it's a necessary evil because I work. I have to have someone here to care for her. We have two income bills. We can't survive off one income. So, the beginning of our nursing journey was very, very rough. I won't go into detail some of the things that we encountered with some of these people, but it was very, very rough, very, very turbulent. We're now in a good space with nurses, but there's some days where you don't want anybody in your space. So that's a challenge. Another challenge is balancing work and going to appointments, making sure medications stay in stock so she doesn't go without. Those two things are full-time jobs on top of my actual full-time job.
Mm-hmm.
So I struggle with that. I really do. And I have feelings sometimes that it's not fair, but then I have to bring myself back. I'm thankful that I am able to work. I am thankful that I am able to bring in revenue to maintain our lifestyle and to keep a roof over our heads and food in our refrigerator. So I always try to have a secondary or tertiary thought that brings me back to a positive space. I can't stay in a negative space for too long. I always have to try to spin it in a positive way.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned gratitude as one of those things that you use to try to remember that there are things to be grateful for, that there are many things to be grateful for. And that is part of the journey that if we're not careful, it's so easy to stay focused on the struggle and the sadness and the difficulties. It's so easy to focus on the negative. And if we're not intentional about looking for things to be grateful for, it's easy to miss it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I love what you said about how you look for different things to bring you back to the positive. Because otherwise we get lost. We get lost and we miss the blessing. I love that you started with the blessings, and that when you mentioned and you differentiated between the blessings and the challenges, the blessings were all the beautiful things about Phoenix, and the challenges were about the practical areas that are struggles. You didn't say anything challenging about her. And so that just goes to show that despite the fact that, yeah, she has, medical needs and there's different things, you've found a way to see all the beautiful things in this beautiful child of yours.
Yeah,
And that is amazing.
the hardest thing about that is not physically caring for her. It's all of the stuff that comes with her.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thankful that Phoenix is not super critical anymore, and that her care is pretty routine, and that, we know what sickness looks like, and we have processes in place to mitigate, hospital visit and everything else. So, I'm thankful that her care is very manageable.
Yeah.
It's just the other things that I struggle with, the administrative stuff per se.
Mm-hmm. And in tune with the gratitude that we were discussing, what would you say you are most grateful for? If you could pinpoint something, what would you say through this whole journey with Phoenix? What are you most grateful for?
I'm grateful she's still here. I can't think of anything else. I'm grateful that she is still here. I thank God every night for my children and for my children's lives, especially Phoenix. Because tomorrow or next week, that could be different. You just don't know. I take nothing
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to Phoenix. prime example, my youngest is sick right now. And so I've been exposed to whatever she has going on. So I have to stay away from Phoenix so I don't expose her. And I was just saying, man, I haven't kissed my baby's cheeks in like 2 days in the name of not trying to expose her to whatever
Mhm.
it has. But those are the small joys that I have. I'm probably getting off topic, but
You aren't. You're right on topic because I asked about what you're grateful for, and you answered that very well. And you also talked about not taking things for granted, right? Because when we're grateful, we start looking for the things that we should appreciate.
mm-hmm.
And so, my final question is, um, what would you say your biggest piece of advice is for someone entering this journey?
Follow your gut. If you feel like something is off, dig into that. You are your child's biggest advocate. And if you don't advocate for your child, you can't expect the doctors to get on board. You can't expect the therapist to get on board. The home health nurses won't be on board. You have to make your impact on your child's advocacy from jump. As soon as you decide which way you're going to go, whether if it's going to be comfort care or if you're going to be proactive and go for interventions, you have to come out swinging for your child. Whether if you're at a semi-friendly hospital or not, everybody has to come out swinging. And you have to set that tone that you mean business about your child, because essentially that's going to help save your child's life. Now, granted, all of them cannot be saved, but you're your biggest advocate for however long your child is here.
Mm-hmm. That is excellent advice. And that is something that was encouraged, especially like going back to the community, is ask questions, be present, be available, be in the hospital, advocate. And I think that's great advice, for anyone that's caregiving, or taking care of a loved one that's in a hospital. It can be an adult's child. Because I think of this like someone may be watching this that doesn't have a child, but is caring for their sibling, family member, whoever in a hospital. And the same thing applies. Be present, advocate. If you're taking care of someone, if you're a caregiver, you are that person's biggest, cheerleader and that person's voice if they can't speak for themselves. Mm-hmm. And so thank you for sharing that piece of advice. I am grateful to have you as part of my journey. And I didn't mention that one of the things we talked about at the very beginning of us meeting was about Samara's eyes, right? And so I know Phoenix has her eye journey. I connected with you because I had questions like, what do I do? Like, Samara doesn't have a left eye, and now they're talking about prosthetics. And this is part of your journey with Phoenix. Can you share a little bit about that?
Phoenix's left eye is very underdeveloped. So because of that, she is unable to naturally open her eye. So to prevent any facial deformity when she got older, she started off with a clear conformer in her left eye, and it essentially was a space holder. So it went inside of her orbital, and it held the space for what her eyeball should be doing, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. St. Patrick's Day, 3 or 4 years ago, she got her prosthetic eye where it actually looks like an actual eye. And it's just like the conformer, it just looks like an eye. So now that she's had it for several years, it has to be molded as she grows, because if we don't mold it or build it up, it's not going to do its job. So she's had that done, I think, twice. We forget that it's in. We forget until she pops it out that it's actually in. It looks very realistic. You can't tell unless I say something. And I actually have a funny story regarding her prosthetic. we were inpatient one time and there was a nursing student doing her assessment. And I saw it. And then later on that day, she popped her prosthetic out. So the nursing student is at the nursing station and I have the prosthetic in my hand. And I'm like, hey, I'm pretty sure you haven't seen this, but her prosthetic popped out. Would you like for me to show you how to put it back in? And she said, that's why her left or pupil didn't react to light. And I was getting ready to bring neurology in, and she just thought her eye was just non-reactive and she didn't know that it was a prosthetic eye. That's how realistic it looks. So we had a good laugh about it. From then on, I made a mental note, okay, mention that this is a prosthetic eye so we won't have neurology swarming our room thinking that something is wrong with her eye. So.
Wow, well, that's amazing how real these eyes look. And I remember when you shared a video with me, like, this is how I clean it, because I was like, how do I do this? I have to take it out and I have to do what? And you were like, it's not that hard. Here's a video. And while you were cleaning it, it fell on the floor. You're like, oops, and you just hit it off. I have to go back and find that video. I have to go back and find that video. But
I forgot.
I want to say that. Yeah, you did. You sent it. And I showed it to her mom. She's like, this is so interesting. But what I love about your openness was that it made me also feel more comfortable with what we were experiencing, because you were very open and honest about the journey, and you were willing to share pictures and videos. And me watching how you were coping with it helped me cope with it. You know, and I remember there were a couple of times where I'm like, I don't like this process. I don't like how it looks when they were doing the different conformers. And you're like, it's part of the journey. You're getting somewhere. This is not the final step. There are more steps.
Yeah.
And talking to you every time we would go to the ocularist or whatever, like, it really helped me. And it goes back to having that community of someone that has walked the path, because it's different and it's encouraging. At least it should be, right? To make sure that you're picking the right people to speak with so that they're helping you grow through your experience and providing that positive feedback that you need. So thank you for being so open with me and with others about your journey. It's truly been a blessing. You're welcome. It's been a blessing to get to know you and to talk to you and to just share the ups and downs of life, not just about our kids, just about life in general, because through this journey, we end up going it becomes more than just about our children. We form true friendships. And so thank you for this interview and for taking the time out to talk to me and to share your story with others.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for thinking of me to contribute to your series. And anything you need, sis.
Thank you. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.